Hey everyone, Howie Fisher with Fisher's Flies. Thanks for checking in. This is episode 7 in my Fulling Mill 2025 catalog series, and this is the Salty Minnow. This is essentially Fulling Mill's version of the EP Fiber Minnow and is a super effective saltwater pattern, but is also really effective for a lot of freshwater species as well, if you've never tried that out. To get started in the vise, I'm using a nice stout saltwater hook from Ahrex. This is an SA 280 minnow hook in size 1. And for the thread today, I'm actually using mono thread from Veevus. This is the 0.20 size, so one of the thicker sizes of mono. And this is slippery stuff if you've never tried it, so just be careful, be aware. I'm going to get started with my thread at the midway point and make sure that I secure that well. If you don't, it can come off as you're trying to wrap materials on. So this fly is pretty much completely made using salty flash fibers from Fulling Mill. And this is a new product from them. Really, really, really like this stuff. You get a ton of material on the hank. So I'm going to get started by taking a piece and just tying it in on the hook shank at the midway point. And then I'm going to bring this back into the hook bend and double it over. This fly is honestly pretty straightforward actually. You're just repeating the same step over and over again for the most part. So again, I'm going to grab another piece, and for the body of this fly, I'm going to use half pieces and quarter pieces to build a natural taper. But I like bringing my clump underneath the body like you saw me do, and then tying it on the opposite side. Same thing with the top piece or the bottom piece. So I'm going to bring it underneath, pull it straight up pretty much, and then backwards at a slight angle, and just secure it and bring it backwards. I like this way, as you saw me do, split the the fibers around the hook point on the bottom. This is nothing crazy I'm coming up with. That's a pretty common practice when tying this style of fly, but just wanted to mention that. So you pull it up like so again, and then just split those fibers to either side before taking a couple more wraps to making sure it's laying backwards. And like I said, that's pretty much it for the majority of the fly. You're just going to keep pulling this up like this. You kind of do want this fly to be pretty sparse to shed water and to cast a little bit easier. You don't need super thick clumps, and you don't need the clumps really close together. As you can see here, I'm kind of spreading them out a little bit. And once you trim the fly, you'll see that it fills out pretty well. And another note, as I get to the head portion of this, you can see my pieces are getting smaller, so I'm taking quarter pieces of a full piece now and just using those to tie in the head. And there's actually some pretty cool videos out there of people who tie these flies more often, who live in the Keys or the tropics, and some people have come up with specific ways to cut pieces for these types of flies. This last section, I'm going to double over these pieces, as you see. So I'm going to tie it on like I would some dubbing for a dubbing head, and then bend it back over. So I'm not going to tie it in over itself or underneath or over top of the hook shank. And then, like I said, I'm going to double it over and tie it back on itself like that. This pattern specifically calls for some Flashabou. So here I'm using Magnum Flashabou or Predator Flashabou because that's what I have in this silver color. And I'm just using one piece. I'm going to cut it in half and then use a half of a piece to double it over on itself and bring it back. But again, as always, use whatever you have. And I'm going to do this on both sides of the hook. Truthfully, you could probably skip this step if you would prefer, especially with the salty flash fibers from Fulling Mill that already have flash in the material itself. And honestly, I think the Fulling Mill fiber flash, salty fiber flash, has just the perfect amount of flash in it. Not too much and not too little, just enough to really make it pop and stand out. But again, kind of nice feature of this, you're adding this lateral line essentially down the side. Another cool thing about this fulling mill version is they take a little clump of hollow silver ice dub and tie it in on the top, and that just adds another kind of layer of flash, and you get that flashy head. Adds a different color to the top too. Another thing that's cool is that when you're tying with this mono, that flash on the head actually will show through that mono, and so the head then becomes silver and flashy rather than just clear or black as the hook shank is. So again, probably fine skipping that step if you wanted to, in all honesty, but just another cool kind of part of this fly process. Just make sure you do coat that head in some glue or some Solarez resin, as I am here, or as I did. You really want to make sure that that mono doesn't come undone, because it will. It's very slippery and will come undone unless you tie a really good knot. Now, the easy part of the fly is over, and really the hardest part of this fly probably is trimming it. And it's not too difficult to trim. You can get carried away with it. You can trim too much, but it's just time consuming. I would say it's hard in the sense that it's easy to get wrong, but it's also easy to do. So again, you want to brush it out like I've shown here. So you want to brush it out, make sure none of the fibers are trapped, make sure you're cutting good, and then start trimming away. But always start with less. Always get yourself a great pair of scissors. These Renamid curved scissors, long blades, are phenomenal for this. They do really, really well for this. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. You can cut with the fibers, you can cut against the fibers. But like I said, start with less. Less is definitely more. If you've been fly tying for a while now, you probably have heard that in a number of different regards. That is also true with trimming these EP flies. Start with less. You can always take more off, but you cannot add more back onto these EP flies, obviously. I can't stress that enough. It's super easy to cut off too much, get too aggressive, and then ruin the whole fly, quote unquote. At least the aesthetics or the look of it. But again, you can get pretty carried away with this trimming process. You can do all sorts of stuff. But what I recommend is cutting down the spine and the belly, if you will, of either side of the fly, and then do the same thing. And you kind of want to, I think what makes these flies look the best is that once you cut down the spine or the belly, you also come in at an angle and kind of round out the top cut that you made. It makes it less boxy, less square, just looks a little bit more natural. So again, as I continue to trim here, feel free to fast forward through this part if you'd like. I'll keep yapping away. Another tip or trick with trimming this type of fly, if you've never done this before, is like I said in the very beginning part of this part of the video, is make sure that your fibers are brushed out. If you stroke all your fibers back and then start trimming, once the fly gets wet, all of those fibers that have been matted down are actually going to open up. And so once the fly gets wet, it's not going to look like what you thought it was once you trimmed it. So if you brush all of the fibers out almost perpendicular to the hook shank, so almost like the fibers are standing straight up, coming straight up off of the hook shank or straight down from the hook shank, it's going to look super big and bulky and ugly. But that's really the best way to do it, because then you're getting the fibers as they naturally are laying as you tied them in, essentially. And so once that fly gets wet, it won't, the shape of the fly won't change. So again, here you have it. This is, some people may not call this perfect. It looks really good to me, and I think it's going to fish just fine. So what I'm doing here on this version is I'm taking a silver Sharpie and I'm just going to color the top of this. And so to give it a little contrast, but also make it look a little bit more natural. A lot of bait fish, both saltwater and freshwater, obviously are not all white. A lot of them have a contrasting top section and a lighter belly or lighter bottom. And so I'm going to make this one gray, make it look like a gray and white or silver and white bait fish. So again, I'm just taking this silver Sharpie, coloring both sides in the top. And same thing as the body, you can kind of get carried away with the coloring if you really want to. You could add some red gills here, which I don't think would be a bad thing necessarily. You can also, add par marks. You can take a black Sharpie and color the very top to make it black, gray, and white. Again, there's a lot of different things you can do. Lastly, I'm adding some epoxy eyes in 7mm from Fulling Mill. These are they're new bait fish eyes. Again, really great product. A lot of Fulling Mill's new products are really, really well priced. Some of them are not necessarily groundbreaking, like these eyes. There's tons of epoxy eyes out there, but I've looked at a bunch of different of these types of eyes, epoxy eyes, and these Fulling Mill products, you're getting the most out of them for your money for similar products on the market. So for example, for these epoxy eyes, they're $3.50 per pack, and you're getting about twice as many eyes as most other packs of eyes are going to have in them, and for a fraction of the price. So once you've got your eyes glued on in place, then you're going to go ahead and grab some UV resin. Here I'm using medium viscosity Solarez. You could also use Solarez Flex. This is a really good option, Solarez Flex, especially on eyes that have more movement to them or might. I don't mind using regular medium viscosity on this specific pattern because these eyes are sitting right against the hook shank. But if you want, or your materials, your eyes are sitting on top of material that have some give, I would recommend using a flexible UV resin. And the reason why I'm saying this is because a lot of times you might have experienced, or you will hear people say that their eyes fall off their bait fish. And I think part of that is maybe not using good UV resin like Solarez. But I think part of it also is that when you use a regular resin like medium viscosity, you're essentially creating, when it cures, it is curing rock solid. And so there is no give, there is no play. And so when a fish does hammer it or chomp down on it, there's no give in it. And so it's just snapping off. But hope you've enjoyed.